So, good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you all to the third session of the SENS MDC Coding webinar. We're going to be doing some different things today. Something a little bit more complicated than we've seen in session 1 and session 2. I'd just like to remind you that if any of you have missed session 1 or session 2, you can find the recordings of the webinars on the SENS website under the MDC tab. So it doesn't really matter if you've missed a session, because you can catch up. And with that, I think Sandra, if I can hand over to you.
Yes, sure. Hello, everyone. Very happy to see you again for our last and actually final session on our webinar series on XLS coding. We sent out the agenda before. Oh, Caroline, I think I'm not. Okay, no, I'm the presenter because I was not able to choose the application. No worries.
I forgot to make you presenter. There you go.
No worries. Okay, and so let me see that you get the full screen. We did send out the PowerPoint just before for those of you who'd like to go along on the PowerPoint because you might not be seeing the screen so well. Please be welcome to do so. Today will be slightly less hands-on because we do want to cover a few more complex things, and our program is pretty tightly packed today, so we need to see how we get through. Caroline, up until when do we have for today?
I've set the webinar until 3:15, so we've got lots of time. We don't have to go till 3:15, but we do have that time.
Okay, great. Just so that we know if we can also take our time if people ask questions and everything. Okay, great. All right. Well, then welcome once more again. This is the overview, the agenda that we'd like to cover today. First, we'd like to focus on the exercise, kind of review of what has been handed in, some observations, question and answers if there are any. And then we'd like to go to troubleshooting XLS forms. So we'd like to highlight a few common errors that you might encounter when you change an XLS form, what they usually mean, and also show a little bit on what to watch out for. A quick recap on testing XLS forms, and then very new, we're actually gonna show you the SENS mapper, going geographic, the SENS mapper, because there is actually a standalone tool available to map out your survey results, provided you have actually taken GPS coordinates at household level. And just for you to see that this possibility is there, and the tool can actually be made available to anyone who's interested in it. Then we also quickly like to show the demography mortality form, which is new since this year, just to highlight a few aspects that go with it. Then we like to do a little zoom in on data quality checks with the example of the MosquitoNet form. We'll talk a little bit about the standardization test, which can be done on ODK. It's also in draft stage yet. We'll talk a little bit about that and when it could be done and what to watch out for. And then we're going to introduce the exercise number 3 for today. So you see it's actually a pretty full agenda today, so let's see how we get through it. Sorry, was there someone? No, okay, just someone joining, okay. As the exercise, just a very quick reminder on what you were asked to do. The first part was very pretty much similar to what you have been doing for the first exercise, the admin changes, clusters, GPS versioning, and so on and so forth. Also the language aspect, and that you should be adjusting the foods according to your current or last operation. But what was different this time was that you actually had to completely change a question. That's the MUAC tapes from that are currently in the global form measured in centimeters, and you had to change them to millimeters and everything that goes along with it. And also you had to actually add a new question. We wanted to know the arrival date of a child, which is a question that actually is being used in quite many operations, usually as a list of options. Okay, then a quick feedback on that. I'll show you the file quickly. This is, oh, okay. It seems as if my application was blocked. Let me quickly make sure that I'm moving swiftly to the Excel file.
We can see the Excel file now, Sandra. It's fine.
Excellent, great. Very good. So we did highlight in the Excel file the aspects in bold and a big red, the aspects that we expected you to change. First of all, of course, on the survey tab, the admin breakdowns in terms of whether you use blocks, zones, and all of that. In the example that we've prepared here today, the idea was actually to use a select one for the blocks, which is always an option that you could be doing. It's not a preset currently in the global form, but it can be helpful in certain settings. So this means that a list name called blocks was introduced. And if I now go to my choices tab, I can see that those blocks are just block A to F, which means that the enumerator gets to see this as choices and doesn't have to type them in. So this is an option that you could be using. Then we did expect you to change the clusters from, you were supposed to accommodate for 1 to 50, so it means that you had to set this to 51, and you had to adjust the message that goes with it. And for the GPS, since you were supposed to take it, you had to remove the relevant, which was set here 1 equals 2, so that the question actually appears for your enumerator. Now scrolling further down, you actually see the new question that you were asked to put in, which was select one arrival. And since we actually wanted to have that for each and every child, because I mean it can be different for children in one family, especially when new ones are being born, you were supposed to put that into the loop of the children, which starts with the begin repeat C, and then you were supposed to put that obviously behind the consent. Whether you put it before sex or after didn't really make that much of a difference, except for that it actually is nicer to put in the beginning, because then you're not messing up the order for your ANA analysis. So you see this was supposed to be a list as well. So the list name introduced here is called arrival, select one. So the enumerator is just able to select one of the choices. And then going to the choices tab, you can now see here the options, the description for the options, and here the values. Now, this is up to you. you can also set this to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever you'd prefer. In this case, we made them into human readable values. Yeah, but that's up to you. So there is no prescription on how having to do that as well. Okay. Then I guess this was the other question that was slightly trickier, because you had to set the MUAC question from centimeters to millimeters, which meant that you had to adjust on the label. You also had to adjust the constraint, because before the constraint was set for centimeter values, and of course also the constraint message to go with it. Consequently, you can actually delete the millimeter question, which is in the global file, which is calculating the millimeter out of the centimeter value. So obviously you then don't need to retain this. Okay, then you would need to adjust the hint as well on the next question, and that's maybe a tricky one, because that's not necessarily something you'd actually thinking of, because this has been set as well to centimeters before, so you actually need to change the hint, and also to change the value here in the relevant, because this also needs to be adjusted to millimeters. And I just saw a question from Fanny popping up. Yes, you could, of course, instead of deleting it, you could also just put in 1 equals 2 in the millimeter calculation, and then it's just not happening. That's possible, entirely possible. I think your question just popped up very quickly, but I think I read it correctly, right? If not, please put it in again. Okay, and then those were the regular things, just adjusting those the labels for the food, and then also for the iron fortified and the micronutrients and so on and so forth. So this was kind of what was supposed to be done on the file. The choices tab we already went through, except for that you were also expected to adjust the camp. Here's just an example of how it could be done. And then last but not least, in the settings tab, you were supposed to adjust the form title accordingly, the form ID accordingly, and the version number accordingly, which is also something you had been doing for exercise 1, so that wasn't very new. Okay, great. I think I'd quickly hand over to Francis just for some stats, or kind of highlighting the common mistakes, or the things that everyone did do very well.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Yeah, so just a quick summary of the main observations from the exercises that you guys have sent. For the administrative information part, I think things were really good overall. Also, I like that some people thought about using select one instead of text for some of the zones and blocks. We can use text entries if we don't have a choice, because maybe you don't have the full list for these administrative level, but in case you do, it's a lot easier to use the data after. So it's good that a few of you have thought of that when that was possible. For the languages, removing the languages not used in the survey, that was also done by quite a few of you. And again, it's just kind of strange if you're not actually translating and adapting the French part of the survey to leave it available on the phone. And it's just one more thing that might confuse the enumerators when they use the survey, so always good to remove it. I would say about half of the exercises had changed the default languages. In that case, it's kind of hard to tell if it's because maybe the default languages that is most useful for enumerators is English. But again, always kind of try to think about the people actually using the phone all day, what is convenient for them. And if they struggle a bit with French or English, then it's always nice to have the survey pop up in their languages first. The version numbers were changed, not always across the board for like things like the title, for example. In some cases, it stayed in the global form title or a different number, but most people thought of managing that as well. Date of arrival, that was probably the most difficult, a bit of a difficult one, but then it was the second exercise, so we wanted it to be a bit more tricky. More exercises than I thought actually included it within the loop, which is very good. And a few of you also thought about putting it kind of at the very beginning, as Sandra just mentioned. It's just convenient for you because then the block of data you actually use stays in the same order, and you don't have a random question that is in column that is inserted in the data output. The constraints were also set on most of the arrival date that were added in the survey. A few of you forgot, and the only issue with that is that if for some reason the consent is not given for a child, then you will have one random question about the arrival date that still shows on the phone, and you kind of have to answer it, so it makes a bit of a discrepancy in your data. So it's good to set the constraint. I had someone who copied the constraint from based on the age, so which is not necessarily bad if you really want the arrival date only for children older than 6 months. But in case you do want to know about the children younger than 6 months, then you shouldn't put not the constraint, the relevant, sorry. So you shouldn't put the relevant pattern based on age unless it's really what you want. But most people thought of asking for the consent before asking that question, so that's good. And the corresponding list in the select one was well done, and I think also going back to the administrative level, most of you seem to have really understood like how the multiple choice question work, which is great. A lot of you also adapted correctly the example for the list of food and liquids based on your context or previous survey, so that was great. The MUAC adaptation, most exercises changed the referrals condition for it, as well as the text. A few of the exercises forgot to change the int. So if there's the constraint message. So if the enumerator enters a value that is not acceptable, then they will have a message that tells them about centimeters instead of millimeters, so it might be a bit confusing. The element that not everyone thought about changing, however, was the referral based on the MUAC. I understand why, because it's a completely different question. So when you adapt the MUAC question, you don't necessarily think about, oh, there's a referral based on the MUAC, so I need to change that as well. But yeah, and in that case, if you do not change the relevant pattern for the referral for children with a low MUAC, it will just never show up in the survey because since we are now in millimeters, no children can have a MUAC less than 12 millimeters in diameter. It's just not possible. So in that case, you will not have the queue for the referrals for the ennumerators. But overall, I think it was really interesting to see the thinking about the way you guys made the changes, and I think you did a good job.
Great, thanks, Francis. Are there any questions regarding the exercise, or any comments that you'd like to make at this point? I'm not sure if someone is, because I do hear more background noise, so I'm not sure if someone is trying to talk. If not, then maybe type it in the chat if the audio is not working well. Caroline, do you have anyone who has typed in, since I can't see the chat window while sharing the screen?
No, no, I don't.
No.
And I can't actually see where the background noise is coming from. Maybe it's from George. Um,
Okay, George has actually raised a hand. So George, did you have a question? I do hear some typing, so maybe a question will emerge now.
maybe. I can't see anything for now. Sandra, I think we can perhaps
Move
move
on.
on, and then if I'll let you know if there's a question that comes.
Okay, sounds good. Great. Thank you, Caroline. Okay, then we would move to our probably main topic today, which is troubleshooting XLS forms. And this is something that you will encounter no matter how often you have done and changed XLS forms, because it happens all the time that you change something and then you might actually not pay 100% attention, or you just don't realize that some things are linked immediately and aspects like that. So a very important part of you changing your forms yourself will actually be that you also have to troubleshoot the forms, which is why we decided to have like a chapter on this today. So typical errors and mistakes that can happen while changing forms. I can hear myself double, so I think somebody had just unmuted. Could you guys mute again? Okay, some of the typical errors are kind of conversion errors. So this is really kind of you making errors in the syntax of your XLS forms, and consequently the converter, whether you use the offline converter or the online converter, just doesn't understand how to translate, if you so want, this aspect into XML format, and will consequently throw a message and tell you, well, something is not quite okay here. Then you have the type of the logical errors, and those ones are a bit more tricky because they will actually pass the validation, meaning there's nothing linked to being the syntax wrong, but they might actually produce erroneous data or unexpected behavior because it's actually not what you intended, and we'll give examples on these as well. And then you have a couple of warnings often coming up. Those ones will not cause errors, and most of the time also they don't necessarily affect the data as such, but they might produce hiccups on the phones for the enumerators, like for instance missing labels trigger warnings. And you might, if you just test it through in one language, you might actually not notice that there is a language missing. So it's definitely good to also check what the warning is about and whether you actually should address it as well. Okay, and then we have the exercise today with the correction sheet, but the correction sheet, which will give you a full list of potential errors that you could encounter, we'll only send in after the exercise 3 is handed in, obviously, as else it's a bit too easy. So, some conversion errors. For instance, a very typical error is that you make a reference to a variable that doesn't exist in the survey, maybe to a calculation, a relevant condition, a constraint. And this quite often happens when you copy from another survey or another global form to the next, and the naming is not precisely the same, or there is actually a field referenced on the row that is not existing in the other form. So this actually happens very, very frequently. What often happens as well is that you either have a missing or wrong list name for select one questions. Like for instance, if you either misspell them or yeah, you just don't copy them out correctly. Other conversion errors are kind of unacceptable characters. Like for instance, you can't on the value side, you actually can't have spaces, for instance, in choices or in survey tabs in the settings for the form ID. For instance, the form ID can't have spaces as well. You can have underscores but no spaces, aspects like that. You might have a missing name for a question or a list name option, and then also Excel versions and corruption issues. They don't really happen that often. You might not actually see it very well here on the screen, but if you zoom in on your version, you might actually see it here. This is the screenshot is a typical Excel conversion corruption issue. So the only thing that actually helps there is to just copy everything into a blank Excel form. So something had gone wrong while converting it. Maybe the form crashed and then introduced an element that makes it hard for the converter to read the Excel correctly. So that can happen as well. The most of the error messages will actually follow a similar structure. We've copied out two examples. This on top is from the online converter, and at the bottom is from the offline converter. Now, in most of the cases, and that's the good thing, those converters will actually tell you which row you have an issue. So that already allows you to go back to the source of the error and actually correct it efficiently. In this case, it actually says that the list name is not in the choices sheet stored. So chances are that you either forgot to put in that list name, or maybe you had typo or misspelling for that list name, and in which case it actually can't find it because you might have misspelled it on the survey tab, or you typed it on the survey tab differently than you actually typed it on your tab with the choices and the list name, for instance. So what to do with an error message? First of all, stay zen, stay calm. The chances are very high that you'll be able to find it, and it has never happened to me that the converter was actually lying. So usually, if the converter picks something up, there really is an issue, and you just need to drill down to that particular aspect. If you have the clear row number indicated, then it's easy. If not, if it's just a name that's being given as a reference, then you could just use it through the search feature in Excel as well, where you just type in, for instance. Here we have an example for also on the choices sheet, where you have an option without a name, and the list name is stool, and then you could just type in, okay, stool, show me where do I have stool, and then you can go line after line to check whether you've actually forgotten either the name or a value or something linked to it as well. Here are some examples of typical error. The first one is, it looks a bit odd at looking at it at first sight, arrival date, but it's because the question name, which is equivalent to the value, to the column, and the value actually, it cannot have spaces in the name. So arrival date just wouldn't pass through like this. Because it contains a space as well. Very typical is a list name being mistyped. Mentioned that before for the select one list. Also very typical that you just have introduced a typo while either copying over or by quickly typing it in, and so it just can't find the reference. Another very typical mistake is actually that you're using the wrong brackets for relevance, for instance. The field name, basically your column name, always has to have these curly brackets. And if you use the regular round brackets, then the converter will tell you there's something wrong here. Another thing is, is that you might have forgotten to use the quotes. So I mean, the syntax is selected, then you have the $sign, you have the curly brackets, you have the name of the field it corresponds to, comma, and then you actually need to put the value into the quotes for the converter to pick it up and to understand and translate it correctly. Now more logical errors. They are a bit more subtle because the converter cannot tell you that something is wrong. So you need to really test the form through, and that's very important, also look at the data output of these tests, because quite often you might not necessarily pick it up through the test, and it's only then when you look at the data that, oh, oopsies, there is something that actually wasn't supposed to be like this. Especially when you have maybe calculation questions or anything in there, you might only see how it actually behaves after submitting some data, downloading it, and looking at it. Here, for instance, this is an example for a logical error. The intended cluster range was set to 50. But the constraint was actually wrongly entered as 15, while the constraint measures was correct. But when a numerator now types in 15, the 15 is refused, like if you had a typo in your constraint. But then the message tells you it's outside the expected range 1 to 50, which is actually not correct. So it completely confuses the enumerator, because that's and you would not necessarily notice this unless you really test it through and you test the borderlines of your constraint, for instance. And it's only then that you realize that the message does not go with what you have actually input as constraint. This is actually very typical, that one changes the one thing but actually forgets to change the other thing to make it consistent. Some other examples, just kind of using the wrong condition, like accidentally reversing the smaller and larger sign, that you actually potentially meant to include the number and not exclude it, in which case you either need to put an equal or to increase, aspects like that. Maybe you have not put all the options when you have a relevant condition. Like if you change one question, but then you actually forget to adapt the relevant condition. And one of the examples that Francis had been highlighting in the exercise is that you have adapted the MUAC question and everything is okay with that, but now the referral question doesn't actually work anymore because it actually has been set to a constraint or to a relevant that is hardly ever met. So aspects like that are those ones you need to look out for, because those ones are a bit harder to find unless you really test. Excuse me, thoroughly. Now warnings. A typical warning is that you are missing a label in one or more of the languages. It could be for a list name in the Choices tab, or it could be really a label of a question. Now, sometimes this can be on purpose. Sometimes you might have grouped your questions in a way that you don't necessarily want to use a group name. but sometimes this actually could just be accidentally that for some reason you have forgotten to input the label for a question, especially for one of the additional languages you're using. Then they usually, okay, as mentioned before, those warnings are not quite as critical as other mistakes, but if you can clear them, if you can actually repair them, then it would be better, because then you can be really sure that nothing actually will produce a hiccup, for instance. And here you can see from the screenshot from the presentation, like the conversion warnings are mostly very clear as well. They even give you the row as well. Row 31, question has no label. So you know where to go back to. And you can see here the screenshot. So this part, this loop doesn't actually have a name for the loop. And that's why it actually threw that warning as well. Okay, I was not going to demo much on this except for just one or two aspects on potential errors, just so that you see it in action on how it's being flagged on the online or the offline converter. So let me go back to Excel. I quickly need to see whether I opened the... No, this is not the one I wanted to open. Let me close this one. Yeah, and have this one open. Yeah, okay. So I've just introduced an error into this sheet, and now I'm going to pass it through my XLS form offline. I need to share that application with you as well so that you can see it. Yeah. I think that should work now. You can all see it, right?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So I'm choosing the one which I've just introduced, faulty, and I run it. And it basically tells me that it is an invalid, I don't know how well you can read it, but it basically tells me that it's an invalid XML tag. Names must begin with a letter, colon, or underscore. Subsequent characters can include numbers, dashes, and periods. Does anyone have a guess why that is the case? And what I potentially might have changed, what doesn't make this form pass? It's something that I have not specifically mentioned, but this is actually something that happens very, very frequently, especially when we get... Yes, Jules has raised a hand. Jules?
Sorry, it's maybe an answer. Could it be the space between the XLS and then faulty?
Correct, precisely. That is a very, very common. Well done. This is a very common error, because quite often this is the case when you save it as another version, or you pass it on. So it can actually often happen to files that we get from the field with with a change request, that they won't work immediately just because they don't have a space in the name. So also the XLS file cannot have a space in the name as well. So let me quickly save it without just removing that obstacle. Choosing the new one that I've just saved and run it again. And sorry, yeah. And now you can see that it actually shows me a next error that I had been introducing as well. I've just changed basically the brackets. I don't know if you can read it very well here as well. But the reason I'm demonstrating this to you is actually so that you can see it usually picks one question at a time. So it picks the first thing that it actually finds, then it gives you the error, then you correct it, and then it shows you the next error in line. There is an exception to the online converter. The online converter sometimes shows the first error, and if there's also a warning associated, it also shows the warning associated. But usually you basically have to tackle one error at a time as well. In this case, just to show you quickly, but I'm not going to run it through again, is that I've removed the brackets. I think it was on the consent question, wasn't it? So it should be here. Oh, I removed it somewhere on the consent. Up. Oh, deario. Not this one. I need to see the row as well. Date of birth with X plus element. Yeah. So it should be here. Yeah. No. The next one. The next one is it? Yeah, date of birth. With the first one that actually has both conditions in it. It basically says here selected consent and selected here the date of birth. So the first one that actually shows this, selected consent and selected date of birth. And if you look very carefully, you can see that behind the consent, I've actually removed the curly bracket and put in a regular bracket. And that's why it actually threw the error. So this was just for you to see how these converters actually work in action, so to speak. Good. Do we have any questions at this point? Okay, then I'll continue. Just very briefly, do want to reiterate testing the best practices. It's something that we had been mentioning last time as well. It's really better to implement one change and test it directly, except maybe if it's just simple text edits, then there's no reason why you need to test them one by one by one by one. You should be testing. I think someone joined us from home with some children in the background. Maybe just mute. That would be great. Oops, sorry. So always test different scenarios. Always test through for consent or for absent household, just to see whether any questions unduly pop up when a household has not given consent or has been absent. Test for the border cases, just to make sure that your constraints, as they said, really work as you have said, and also that the constraint messages, as you have set them, really work. Test more than just one repeat group, also to see whether the data that results from it actually works out correctly as well. And then, of course, for a form like the child, that you test different ages and date of birth as well. Yeah, and whilst you could do a first test in the web form, as we've been showing in last seminar, you always need to test on the phone, because it behaves slightly differently on the phone, and the phone is what your enumerators will be using, so you need to make sure that it really is adapted to that as well. Okay, then going geographic, introducing the SENS mapper. I've put a little screenshot in here, but of course the idea is that I'll demo it to it live. Maybe just give you the main elements about the SENS mapper. I think there's again someone with where it would be good to mute. Just yeah, a lot better now. Great, thank you. So the main points about the SENS mapper, it has been produced to map out SENS survey results for particular aspects, provided that you actually have taken the GPS coordinate at household level as well. So for children, it maps out anemia, malnutrition, and stunting. based on whether there is one child that would basically if you want the worst, I put it in quotations, the worst case in a given household. Why? Since a household just has one coordinate, you cannot actually not overlay and show for all the children inside a household. It's just not visually. You cannot. Sorry, there's someone really back on the mic again with a lot of background noise. Yeah, I think it's getting slightly better. So because you would then have all these points overlaying, it doesn't really make sense to show all of them, because you actually can't view all of them anyways. So the idea is to show where there are cases of children in basically the bad conditions, and those ones will then be picked over the children. So I mean, in the same household, there might just be one child which suffers from anemia, but that child will then be shown, and not the children of the same household that might not suffer from anemia. Basically, just for you as an explanation. For the children, for the malnutrition and the stunting to work, you actually would need to do your inner analysis, because those ones can't work on the raw file, whilst the anemia can work on the raw file, as it is based on the HB basically. For the women, it also shows you anemia, also based on the HB. For WASH, we have water satisfaction, and it also shows some reasons if not satisfied on the map. And mosquito net, it shows you the households that have slept under an LLIN or a regular mosquito net. If one person inside the household has slept under net, I mean, same thing. You can't have that show for different. So in this case, we basically show the best condition. If one person in the household has slept under a net, then it actually shows up that the household is using LLIN and regular mosquito nets, even though there might be household members that might have not used it yesterday. Okay, then let me move out of this and share my application with you. Up. Okay. No. The right tab is here. Okay, so this is basically a standalone file. Currently, it's available in a zip. So you unzip it, and you need to double click on the Open Me HTML to get to this page. The idea is that it will also become available online and will be integrated on the UNHCR map portal. We will of course alert you once that has happened, in which case you don't need the standalone. Okay, so this is the welcome message. This is a very brand new version which we just tested yesterday, so I hope everything goes well. If not, then it's a very good test case in case we find issues for this new version. Okay, now the next window that pops up gives you some information about camp mapping base map. Basically, there are some camp mapping initiatives inside UNHCR for particular camps to be mapped out, and those ones can be made available through this application as well. We basically link them up. It does take you some time to download them, and it's depending on which area you're in, there might actually not be any camp mapping base data. So it might depend on whether you will be able to really use this. If you're worried about the internet connection, or you're pretty sure that in your area there has not been any camp mapping, you could just click on no thanks. I'll click on yes, download data, because I do want to demonstrate it with one camp where we actually have some data for it as well. Now it does take a little bit of time to access and to download. Okay, now it tells me it's okay. Now I can choose here the module. I think I'm going to start with WASH. and then I'm asked to navigate to the file. So now what's important to know as well, you do need an internet connection for this to work, to the sense that all these background tiles can't load in if you don't have an internet connection. However, your own CSV files that you have on your machine, they are not being uploaded or anything to the internet. They're really just on your local machine, and you're just loading them from your local machine as well. Okay, then I'm going to choose, no, I'm not going to choose Tanzania. I'm going to do that a little later. I'm going to choose, I think, Niger first. Up, data. And I'm going to choose the WASH questionnaire. It now tells me that there are several camps in my area of study. The moment I actually upload a module with GPS coordinates, it actually compares the GPS coordinates and then checks up for which of those camps we might have camp mapping data. And now if I click on it, we have for two camps, we actually have the camp mapping data. For Abala and Tababare, I'll choose that one. I accept it, and it's now loading as well. There's a little bit of a description for you, how you can switch it, and how you can actually also open the legend as well as a user information. Okay. Then I could be switching to camp mapping now. And I can see the one where the label comes up. That was the one that was loaded. So I'll zoom to it. Zoom once more. The reason why there were actually 3 camps coming up is because the 3 camps have been collected together and they're all in the same file. And that's why I get the option to load all of the 3. Now I have not chosen my symbology column, so you can see that there are only a few points coming up here in gray because I haven't told my mapper what to do. I'll now click forward to satisfaction, and maybe it's not the best camp I chose because it seems as if there's only one person has really been satisfied here. I don't know if you can see it very well. There's a little green drop here. For gray ones, that means that there has not been data for the household as well. So this is basically how it can look like. Maybe I should actually choose. Let me go back to OSM and zoom out again. OSM background stands for Open Street Map Data. And see, yeah, I think I have more data in those ones, so I should have probably chosen any of those to demo. There you go. Looks better in the sense I don't have much background here, but I do have my points. Green is being satisfied. Orange is being partially satisfied. And then the ones that are unsatisfied actually show the reasons to go with it as well. In this case, they are not satisfied because they feel like they have to go a long distance to access the whatever water source is available to them. Okay, I do want to show quickly the child as well, for which I'm going to load another file. And that one would be Tanzania, but I think I'll get it from the data. And this should be the one. Oh no, this is not the one with the coordinates. Sorry about that. It should be that one, the one with the coordinates. Now it tells me again that this has been camp mapping data has been found for this area. And now I'm being asked to upload the CSV file with the module data. Just have to see, it should be that one. And now I actually get, and this one is not a raw data file. This one is the one that contains the NL results as well, which is why I have now 3 different options to choose from: anemia, stunting, and acute malnutrition. So if I switch to stunting, you can see that the legend here has changed, or the symbols have changed the color. Now for this survey, for some reason, it actually is not able to read the data out. So you have the chance to put in the data, the survey date. Of course, this is not correct because the survey is from last year, but I'm just for the sake of showing it. And then it actually comes up at the bottom, which says survey date. So either, if it can, it picks up the survey date directly from the file and it shows it down here, which would usually be the last date on your file. Or if it can't do that because for some reason the date columns have been formatted in a way that it can't read it, then it actually asks you to input the survey date. Okay, then let me maybe zoom in a little. Nyongusu is of course a huge camp, so kind of loading the data also takes a bit of time. This is the OSM background. You can see that parts of the camp actually has been mapped on OSM as well, and it now shows you that all the green ones, that there is no child with stunting in the household. A red one is at least one child with stunting in the household, and gray is no data in household. Okay, now what you could do is actually that you add the camp name as well, Nyarungusu, for instance. Not Gusu. Nyarungusu. Oh, I did misspell it again. Nyarungusu. Hope it's correct now. Then it will come up here. And you could export in brackets because it's not really an exporting mechanism. It actually allows you to show the map in a layout, and you could then take a screenshot for your report. Just copy that out for your report as well. A new option for those of you that have seen the SENS Mapper before is that you can now switch to portrait layout for those camps where it might make sense to do that. This one would be difficult to do because you have so many points as it's such a large camp. But for some camps this might make sense. Then everything has been centered as portrait for you. And if you actually want to switch off these, you can click those off as well, and then you can take a screenshot just with this and then copy it into your report. Okay, so I guess this is the main aspects about the SENS Mapper. Are there any questions or any comments, remarks on that? Okay, if they're not, then the next one would be the demographic model, which is new as well. Just for you that you can see that this is available. Basically, as an overview, it has been coded with 3 different sections. Section A is the people living in the household. Section B is the people having left the household, and Section C is the people that have deceased in the period, in the recall period that you have set. Usually what's being done after you have entered each section, that you get a summary at the end of the section on your phone, summarizing. In this case, you've mentioned 2 persons living in the household, amongst 0 have rejoined and 0 were born into it. And then this gives the enumerator the chance to review whether this actually had been filled correctly, and this is being redone after every section. And then there is also a global summary at the very end, where you again have the chance to really check whether the findings of the demography sheet are actually correct. This is I've taken this extract from the SMART questionnaire because that's the one that I had found online. So it's basically mimicking the three different sections as well. So here list A is the members currently living in household, which is a loop called live, so currently living. Then the second bit is list all of the household members that have left this household. The loop for this one is called left, having left. And then the loop for the people that have died during the recall period as well. I did send this form to you as well, so you could also open it and have a look at the structure if you feel like it. In the XLS, so this is then also three different groups with begin and end repeat. Since you don't know beforehand how many household members you will actually enter, it needs to be a begin and an end repeat, and then with mostly calculated fields. That it calculates the possibly joined, born, and on so on and so forth. This is rather complex in terms of the calculation bit, but it's really so that it's made easy that you can copy the results together and copy them into ENA. So the structure of this form is not so very intuitive at first. Because of that, we wanted to make it very, very user-friendly for the enumerators to use, since it mimics more or less the questionnaire, but also for the survey managers to use it so that they really just need to copy and paste the data together. So in terms of adaptations in XLS forms, there are only two things that really need to be adapted, and that's kind of the important events to mark the period, like the recall period, that is being made very clear in the form as well. Now the challenge is to implement this. I don't know if you have anyone on the call today that have recently used it, but it's certainly that you have three different loops to mimic this, that you enter it the same way as on the questionnaire, but then later the data output is a bit harder to understand because these three different loops obviously all come in three different CSV files, as they would with, you know, women, where you have the household part, and then you have the part with the women. For the demography, you have the household bit, or the basically the bit that just contains the metadata. It doesn't contain a lot more questions than that. And then you have actually three loops on the one that currently live, on the one that have left, and the one that have died. And which means that you're actually left with four different CSV files from this. The other thing that makes it a little more difficult and potentially also needing a lot more training on that is if you made a mistake, those notifications will actually help you to detect whether you made a mistake. But then your enumerators really need to be comfortable in navigating throughout the group, using the prompt view, going back to the higher level, moving maybe to the next group, and then kind of adjust in the next group. Retrieving the correct group member can actually be a bit challenging for this module, and it's something that you need to take into consideration when you train your enumerators on this. And then, of course, there's something that is not linked really to the phone. It's just it needs to be kind of very clear on how who should be counted as having left, and how to count the newborns and things like that. Okay, the steps to use the data in ENA. We try to make this as user-friendly as possible. It's basically that you open all the different CSV files, and then you choose one and you copy the rest of the data into the same CSV file. Because we mimicked the columns to be in the same order, the column name actually doesn't really matter. You could copy and paste from all the 3 loops just below each other. And you'd only then keep the columns with the prefix ENA, because those ones are the ones that will help you to have the file structured precisely as ENA, the current version of ENA, obviously, is using it right now. And once you've done that, you could just copy and paste the data into ENA itself. Okay, I wasn't going to demo this because it would actually take quite a bit of time, but if there are any questions on this, or maybe someone wants to share that in case they have used it. I don't think Mary is on the phone. She has used it before, but there might be others on the webinar today that might have used it.
Sandra, hello, Mel. Hello, everybody. Melody here. Sandra,
Hi,
I think it might be a bit confusing to people who haven't used it. Perhaps you could send us the link to the you had made a small movie explaining the whole cutting and pasting. I think that will help a lot for participants to see this, to understand a bit better.
Yeah, I have actually included the instruction file with screenshots in my email as well. So if people wanna have a look at that, because we made it the movie is a previous version, so we made it even easier after the feedback that we have gotten from ACF. So I would actually need to check for the movie whether that's still the correct way of doing it, to be honest, Melody. And if not, we could just produce a second movie just to make sure. It's I don't know, have you opened potentially the Word document that I had included in the email? It basically illustrates all the steps with screenshots. And yes, I'll have a look. I'll have a look at the movie if this one is still correct, and then I can pass this on as well. It was embedded in a PowerPoint, but we can also produce it in a way so that it can actually be uploaded to the SENS webpage as well. Would that be helpful? Okay, great.
It would. Thanks.
Great. Okay, then, yeah, we are galloping today, I know, but we have a bit more content to cover. One aspect that we thought is important to mention is data quality checks, and one could, of course, say a lot about this, but we've just wanted to highlight it on the MosquitoNet module, because there it's particularly important, as the way the MosquitoNet module is set up, it's kind of easier, if you so want, to make mistakes than on any of the other modules as well. So basically, I'm just trying to explain a little why it is easy to make mistakes for those of you that don't have it present in their mind right now. Is that at first the enumerator asks the household members like how many children are in the household present, and then how many household members, then how many children that are less than 5 years, and then also how many pregnant women. And then afterwards, based on the answers that have been given in those questions in the first part of the survey, the household members actually loop. So basically, if you put in 5 household members, then the household members will loop 5 times. Also, you're being asked how many nets can be observed. And then if you input 2 or if you input 3, then the net loop will actually take you around 3 times so that you can enter the net details 3 times. So this is being done automatically based on the answers that you've been given before. Now, and that's the critical part, in the household part, you are being asked whether the members have actually slept under a net or not. And also you are being asked whether the household members are women and pregnant, or whether the household members is a child below 5. And it is possible that if you've actually answered 5, or 5 is a bit high to number, let's say two children under 5 before, that if you are in the roster part where you're entering all the information about the household members, if you then make a typo there, or you just tick on the wrong option, that you might have actually answered that there is only one child under 5, for instance. Now this can be compared, and a note usually pops up if any discrepancy is noticed on the phone. Like, for instance, this is the introduction question where you see how many people live in this household and slept there last night, 4, how many children below 5 years in this household, 1, and how many pregnant women, 1. And then you're being asked, is this household member male or female? Male. How old is member? Less than 5 years. And then if you made a mistake here, that discrepancy note will come up, and it will tell you that the total number of children in the household declared at the beginning of the form does not match the number of children you have entered in the group, because you have actually entered 2 children that are below 5. Please review to ensure that they match. So the enumerator actually gets to know if there has been a discrepancy in the way the household part in the introduction has been filled up and the way that the roster part has actually been filled up. However, I think this alone does not necessarily help all that much if the enumerator does not necessarily know how to correct this. And that's where the data quality and the checks come in. So there's one aspect. There is the aspect that supervisors would actually need to check ideally before this is actually being submitted, at least in the training part or in the pre-test, just to make sure that people have come across this. It might even make sense to misfill this just as an example so that they can actually see and then tell them how they need to navigate through the form, like using the prompt view, going 1 level up, choosing the right group, changing it in the group depending on whether it was a mistake in the household roster or whether it was actually a mistake on the introduction part, and really make sure that they're comfortable in using this message to the best of their advantage and actually cleaning the data and making sure that there is no discrepancy between what they had entered first and what they had entered after as well. So this is to explain or basically visualize it a bit more. The total children is the one that actually have been declared in the beginning. And the total PW is the number of the pregnant women that have been declared in the beginning. Now, usually with columns that start with an X are actually columns that are being calculated. So in this case, this is the number of children that have been counted as the loop, and the number of pregnant women that have been counted through the household loop. And you can see that there is a discrepancy, that total children have been entered 1. In the household loop, there have been 2 declared. Total pregnant women, there have been 0. And then in the loop, there has actually been 1 declared. So this would trigger that message, as you've seen before. But the reason why we show it here is actually that you can see it in the data as well. You checking the data as a survey manager or as a supervisor. and this is how you can actually spot those, and how you can make sure that that you can correct them and address them, especially in the very beginning when the enumerators are just getting used in using the mosquito net form. Okay, I think those were the main points that we wanted to highlight on this. Are there any specific questions on this, or any aspects that you'd like to highlight? The next topic would be standardization test, and I would hand over to Francis. Francis, would you be showing that or screening that from yours, or will you just tell me when I should be switching slides?
I was thinking of actually doing a demo on it. I think it would probably make sense. Yeah, so I think I'll just go through the slides quickly and then show the actual file.
Okay, then I'll leave it. Sorry.
Okay.
Maybe Francis, I'll make you presenter then in that case.
Great.
Then let me stop sharing mine in the meantime.
Okay, and now just need to know where to share my screen with WebEx. Okay, share my screen. So, yes.
Francis,
you need
can
to
you use? Yeah, maybe you can explain, Sandra.
Francis, you need to use share application, because if you do share screen, it actually will introduce those strange gray boxes that we had in the very first webinar. So
okay.
Don't share screen, but go share application and then choose the application you want to share instead.
All right, I get it. Awesome. Okay, so now we should be good. Okay, great. So for standardization test, this is kind of an add-on that we've been developing to help a little bit with the preparation of the survey. During a deployment in Jordan, we were kind of made aware that they had been experimenting with this, and oddly enough, it had never really occurred to us, I think, or we just never went through trying it ourselves. And we kind of thought it was a good idea because, as you know, typically you write down the measures from the standardization test on paper, and then the survey manager has to enter it on a computer. And generally speaking, they are on pretty tight timelines for this. So if there's a way to collect it on the phone directly and save some time, then it's an interesting approach. So that removes the need for the manual data entry. It also helps a bit with controlling the data from the test. You can set the constraints as you do on the survey. And even if the survey manager wants, if you set up the VM and set the fonts, send the data directly to it, then you can almost monitor in real time what is being collected from the enumerators during the test. So far, UNICEF has used it, at least Liberia, and with UNHCR, we have used it 3 times already, once in Jordan, in Malawi, and in Burundi. This is very much something still in development. We don't necessarily have a finalized versions to it, because there are a few different ways in the way that that things are being done for the standardization test. So we need to really nail down those details. But I think the process is moving along and is quite interesting. What we've learned so far with doing these tests, first of all, it's a lot easier from a technical perspective for us to manage the data if the child are numbered with a unique number each. What a lot of places have been doing, I think, when they have 2 groups of children, they would just number 2 different sessions and number the childs and the stations 1 to 10, for example. And so that came up in Burundi last time. So this is something that would need to standardize basically how we name each of these stations for this to work well. The main issue to tackle if we want to use the phone is that when you download the data from aggregate, if you have it in your memory, what it looks like, it's very different from what ENA is expecting when you enter the standardization test result manually. You cannot just copy paste the output from aggregate into ENA and have your test results directly. So we need a tool to make the conversion for us, at least as long as ENA does not directly accept the data from aggregate. Okay, yeah. So I think I will actually show you the tool right now instead of the slide. I think. Oh, I need to change the sharing. Yes.
Francis, just before you do, we can still see the grey boxes on the screen. So could you, for the demo, can you just make sure that you go to the Share tab and Application?
Yeah.
So not on the whiteboard, but on the Share at the top, and then Share Application.
And then Excel.
If that's the demo, yeah.
Yeah. Are we good now?
No.
Too bad.
We still see grey boxes?
Yes. Oh, too bad.
Maybe you can you close your chat and the participants box?
Okay.
Yeah.
We can't see anything now.
Because you should really not see the whiteboard anymore yourself when you're actually sharing the application. You can really only see the application. Okay.
Now is it do we still see the grey boxes?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh well, can't be helped now.
Okay. Okay, I'll still explain how it works. Hopefully we don't have too many grey boxes. So the survey itself is really simple. It's a few questions, basically just identifying the who is taking the measurement, what is the station, and then we basically enter the measurement, the weight, the height, and the MUAC. In terms of adaptations to that very simple survey, this XLS form, you would basically just convert it like you do with all the modules you use, and you would upload it on aggregate and then download it on the phone. The only adaptations you would need to make would be, again, for the MUAC, in case the MUAC is in centimeters or millimeters, just need to make sure that that the form, the constraints that you put here works. And then in the Choices tab, you would need to put the list of the different enumerators that are taking the test. So you can see here on the Choice tab, the other options, we don't need to touch them. It would only be the name of the different enumerators and also a code assigned to each of them so that they can select their name on the phone. Of course, you could just assign everyone a number, but I think just to minimize the chances of mistake, I think the chances of someone selecting the wrong name by mistake is very low, but just selecting the wrong number is probably a bit higher, so it's probably better to work this way for that kind of thing. So this is for the XLS form part of the standardization test. And in the same file, you have also the tool that allows you to convert the data from the format that you will download in aggregate into what ENA will accept as a copy-paste. For the tool to work, you basically need to copy the list of enumerators with the codes and the name and paste them in the list that is provided here. And in case you're using supervisor measures as a reference, then you would also need to enter separately here the supervisor, the code and the name of the supervisor. When the tool is set up like this, there's a tab here that is named Aggregate Data. Currently, as you can see, the tab is empty. And there's a cell here that says Paste Aggregate Data here. So I'm just going to go and open the data that I've downloaded from Aggregate. So as you can see here, this is just a very regular data download from ODK Aggregate that you would get. And you would have here all the measurement for the children, the weight, the height, and the MUAC, as well as the name of the different measurers. So you can simply select all of this, copy it, and then we're just going to go and paste it here where it says to paste the data. We do not need the title of the columns because we already have them present above. So I'm just going to delete the first row. So on this tab, I've just pasted the data downloaded from Aggregate. And now if I go into the next tab in green and I format, so you can see that I have the different station number for the children. And then the data is formatted for the supervisor. So in that case, we were using a supervisor measurement as a reference. You have the measure number 1 for the weight, the measure number 2 for the weight, and similarly for all the other measurements. And you can see, for example, for child number 1, the measurements are very similar, which is expected, of course, because you need some consistency in the different measurements. And if you move further to the right, then you have the data for enumerator number 1. So in this case, it was a lady named Nadej, and you can see our different results here. And apparently, there was a bit of a mistake in the weight measurement for the first child because they are very far apart. But the other ones are pretty consistent. So, and that data here is the one you would simply copy and paste into ENA, because if you recall in ENA, the standardization test is in that format. They expect the weight for the first and the second, and the height for the first and the second, ordered in this way. And so basically, the advantage, if we just recall the process, would be that the enumerators would use the font directly to enter their measurement. And then you would already have the data in your Aggregate server. And whenever the test is finished, you would basically download the data from Aggregate, take all of it, copy it into the Aggregate data tab of the tool, and then you would have something you can already paste into ENA without needing to enter it manually. Of course, it looks a little bit rough still. I mean, it's not a very finished tool, but as I was saying, we're still kind of developing the idea. And of course, if you have any thoughts or ideas related to that, or feedback about like your experiences of doing the standardization test, feel very free to drop us a line and write an email about that so that we can integrate your thoughts on the topic. Oh, I should stop sharing, eh? Okay.
Sandra, we can't hear you. I think you might be on mute.
Sorry.
I can see you
Yes, I was.
Okay.
I was. Sorry, I was just saying thank you, Francis. And I do believe we have 1 or 2 people online now that have actually used the standardization test before. I don't know if they want to give quick feedback. The last point on our list today is really just discussing the exercise, basically. That would be the last point, and we probably don't take more than 5 minutes for that. So we do have a bit of time if someone wants to give feedback on the standardization exercise. Okay, doesn't look like it. If not, please just type it in. Then I'll just go back to the PowerPoint and we can just go through Let me hop through these. Up. No. Okay, up here. Our last point for today is our practical exercise, our homework with the exercise instructions, and we'll be sending them out after this webinar, and then you have a little bit over a week to return them, and then you'll get feedback again, and for the ones that have actually returned all the exercises, you will be getting also a certificate for all of this. Okay, so what we thought this time is actually that you are being asked to debug a questionnaire, and since you haven't actually been working with the WASH module before, we prepared a buggy WASH module, like a WASH module where things are not correct. We still ask you just for good practice to implement the admin changes again. So those ones have also not been done properly in the file that you're going to receive with the cluster numbers, the GPS for all households, the versioning, the language properly listed, and so on and so forth, just for good practice, since this is something that you will always need to do for any XLS form, global form that you're going to get. And then very, very simple, you just correct any mistakes that you find, any errors, any warnings, and any logical errors. There are up to 15 mistakes to find. Some might be a bit more trickier to find than others. So just for you, so that you get a general idea on what to look out for. Having said that, as I said, the ones that are really conversion errors, they will come up one by one if you actually push the module through the conversion. But then with the warning and the logical ones, then those ones are a bit more subtle to find. Okay, the following instructions are just the same as they have been for all of the exercises. We'd also like you to load it on aggregate, either VM or online. I think there have only 2 people tried to load and use aggregate online, but they've actually not submitted any records on there neither. I think they've just tested to upload their form there. Please really don't feel shy to use that online aggregate. Even if you have the VM working, if you just want to get a feel of it, how it works out, if you use that online, then please make use of it. Then we'd like you to also to fill 3 records and sync, also just for good measure, because it's a very good practice if you do this and if you can actually do it in your sleep. So basically, we should be able to wake you up at 3 o'clock at night and tell you now go and sync some records and retrieve them with briefcase and so on. No, I'm exaggerating, but it's really things that come up all the time, over and over again. And if you kind of have them internalized, then it's kind of very simple, and you won't forget them ever again for any of the surveys, even if there is a bit of a time lapse between one survey and the next survey that you're doing. Okay, the instructions will have been included in the PowerPoint as well. How you can find the XLS converter, how the URL for the online XLS converter, so that you can see that as well. I've also relisted the URL for the aggregate app spot, including the login and the password. So you can find it all there as well. Okay, great. Well, thank you. We are at the end, and we do have a bit of time still, I guess. So we could take a bit more questions before we are cut, I believe. I think we have probably 5 more minutes or so. Anyone else having some comments, some thoughts?
Yes, Sandra, I just have a a comment that I mean I said this in the very first session, but basically in 2011 we hadn't done anything, or we were just starting with mobile data collection. I think here we are 5, 6 years later, and really moving on. You know, with we have the majority of the surveys now that use mobile data collection. Many more people who are using it and who are feeling comfortable with it. I guess in the absence of any technical questions to either yourself or Francis, I would like to put a question out there to the group on the format of these trainings. Are you finding the WebEx trainings useful, interesting? Would you like us to organise more, either on mobile data collection or on SENS in general? So I would just like to get an understanding of how people are feeling it and whether we should continue. Okay, so a question from Blessing on will you be sharing the demography and standardization tools? And an extremely useful method of training. Thank you very much, Blessing.
In terms of the demography form, the draft form as it stands right now, we've actually sent that out on the email. For the standardization tool, I would leave the question maybe to Caroline, because we've really only tested this, I think, in 2 circumstances now. So we thought more of doing this on a case-by-case basis, like someone really being interested, so that and interested in working with us to fine-tune it further. But I mean, that's totally up for discussion, really.
But in general, I would agree. So if any of you are interested in using MDC to do the standardization test, then please contact myself or Nasser when you're organising the survey, and then we can organise for that assistance to be provided to your operation. Okay, Dixon's saying the training is useful and exciting, very practical. He's learning and practicing already. I think it's great feedback. Thank you, Dixon, and hopefully others are finding it too. I agree. I think it's very practical. And Sandra, it's difficult material to get across in a simple way, and I think you're doing it very, very well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Very happy to hear that people find it useful. We will be sending out an evaluation as well, where you can actually give more details. We haven't prepared it yet, and we first want the people to be able to concentrate on the 3rd exercise. So it might come along while you're at the 3rd exercise as well. But yes, it would be very helpful for us if you could then fill the evaluation so that we get a sense on which aspects we should be maintaining, which we should be keeping, which aspects could be improved. Maybe there are topics that you would have liked to know about that we haven't covered in our mini-series of 3 webinars. So yeah, great. Well, thank you so much.
Okay, well, Francis, Sandra, thank you very much for all the hard work put into organising this, and I'd like to thank everybody else for your participation, not just to the webinars, but also in the homework, and being quite diligent in the exercises as well. So we look forward to seeing the third exercise, and let's keep on learning together on mobile data collection and all of the new improvements that we're making. So thank you to everyone, and goodbye for the moment.
Bye. Thank you.
Người mất rồi. Bây giờ rồi cái một cái gì? Cái là kurang kilo. Ini lah. Ini lah mana cari? Sekarang kalau untuk kita, kita ni mana? Mesti ni mana? Menarik.